The stars weren't bright tonight. Nico noticed that first. They hung above the orchard like old lanterns, flickering behind thin clouds. He stood at the top of the ridge, his boots sinking a little into the soft earth. Behind him, rows of peach trees whispered in the dark wind. The harvest would come soon, late by a week, and the orchard was heavy with promise and sleep. He shifted the worn lantern in his hand, watching the sky instead of working. It was that kind of night, when silence sat thick and the world seemed to hold its breath. Then it came. A soundless crack, like space itself split open. The air around him changed, pressing inward, a pressure in the chest. A streak of white fire tore across the sky. Not lightning. Not a shooting star. This was something else. He followed it instinctively, steps brisk down the narrow trail, through the overgrown grass, past the fence where the land dipped toward the far orchard slope. He wasn't sure what he expected to find. A meteor maybe. Space junk. Something dead and glowing. But he found a crash. Half buried in the dirt where the old walnut tree once stood, something metallic steamed and hissed. Not charred black like a falling rock, but smooth silver like molded light. It pulsed faintly, as if alive. Nico stopped at the edge of the broken grove, lantern raised high. The trees around the object were scorched at the roots but otherwise untouched. The grass lay flat, flattened outward in a perfect circle. Then it opened. Not with violence. Not even sound. Just a slow petal-like bloom, panels retracting into themselves, revealing a strange soft light inside. A hand appeared first. Pale, long-fingered, graceful. Then the girl. She stumbled forward, her steps uneven, collapsing to her knees. Her skin shimmered faint silver beneath streaks of dirt. Her hair fell across her face like strands of twilight, and her breathing was shallow. She wasn't alone. Behind her, a child climbed down, barefoot, small, no older than 6. The boy's eyes glowed soft blue, and he clung to the girl's side, not speaking, just staring. Nico didn't know what to say. His mind screamed to run. To hide. To call someone, anyone. But she looked at him, eyes glazed with pain, and whispered only one word. Banished. And then she fell. Nico dropped the lantern and ran. The shed hadn't been used in 2 seasons. It smelled of crushed leaves and old metal, but it was dry, warm, and hidden. Nico cleared a space on the workbench and covered it with a canvas tarp. He laid the girl gently across it, careful not to move her too much. The boy followed without a word, crawling beside her, curling into her side like a frightened animal. Nico sat back on his heels, heart pounding. He didn't understand what he was looking at. She was, not human. Not entirely. Her veins glowed faintly through her skin. Her features were symmetrical in a way that made her almost too beautiful, too precise. The boy was the same. But they were tired. Bruised. Fragile. They weren't soldiers. Not monsters. Not machines. Just, lost. Nico waited. Hours passed. He fed the fire in the corner stove and kept the door locked. The orchard groaned outside as wind rolled through the branches. Finally, near dawn, the girl stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, soft gold, not quite focused. You're safe, Nico said before he could think. She blinked, coughed, then nodded weakly. You helped us. He shrugged. You crashed in my orchard. Seemed rude not to. She smiled faintly. He knelt, offering a tin cup of water. She drank slowly, her fingers trembling. My name's Nico, he said. Her voice was rough. Iron. He nodded toward the boy. Your brother. Leaf. Nico glanced at him. The boy sat quietly on a folded blanket, eyes wide and unblinking. He hasn't spoken. He doesn't. Not like you. Iron shifted, then winced. Does he understand? More than most. Nico stood and moved to the other side of the shed. He needed space, air. The presence of the two strangers filled the room too much. It wasn't fear anymore. Just wait. Something heavy, unspoken. What happened to you? He asked, not turning around. Iron was quiet for a long time. Then, my people exiled us. They said Leaf was broken. Nico looked at her now. He doesn't seem broken. He feels too much. Sees too far. Her fingers grazed the boy's hair. Our kind doesn't tolerate that. Your kind being. It doesn't matter. She looked tired again. We ran. They followed. I aimed for the furthest place with the lowest light signature. Nico exhaled slowly. And that's my orchard. Yes. He studied her again. Not the glowing skin or strange eyes, but her face. Her exhaustion. Her quiet strength. You can stay, he said. For now. Her head tilted slightly. Why? He hesitated. Maybe because you're not the only one who's been told they don't belong. Over the next few days, things changed. Leaf stayed close to Iron, but wandered more. He explored the orchard with bare feet and watched the birds as if listening to a story. Sometimes, when Nico walked by, he would be sitting in the grass, touching a fallen petal, and it would bloom again, full and fresh. Nico saw it. Never asked. Iron healed slowly. She started walking again, helping Nico prune the east grove. She learned quickly, hands gentle on the bark. They talked at night. Quiet conversations. Nothing about planets or powers or wars. Just, life. She asked about the orchard, his old dog who'd passed, his sister who used to run this farm with him. He asked nothing in return. Until one night. They stood under the blooming plum tree, watching the stars. You said they'll come looking, Nico said. She nodded. They don't leave loose ends. What do they want from Leaf? To silence what he is. What he could become. Nico leaned against the trunk. What could he become? More than they understand. Her voice softened. He was born during a convergence, an anomaly in our moons. Some called it a blessing. Others, a threat. Nico looked at her, at the silver shine of her skin under starlight. And what do you call it? She didn't answer at first. Then, I call him mine. Nico nodded slowly. They stood in silence. Then Iron said, You're not afraid of us. He turned toward her. No. Why? Nico didn't know how to explain it. Not really. Maybe it was because she never lied. Maybe because she looked at her brother the way he remembered his sister looking at him when they were kids, like love was armor. Or maybe because her presence filled the quiet space in his chest that had gone empty years ago. I think, he said, you've already been through worse than anything I could ever imagine. I'm not about to add to that. She looked at him. Really looked. And smiled. Thank you, she whispered. He didn't smile back. But his hand brushed against hers, just for a second, and she didn't pull away. Nico dreamed that night. He dreamed of green light, blooming trees, and a boy's laughter echoing through his orchard. He woke with the warmth of that sound still in his ears. But outside, the wind had changed. Far to the north, in the direction of the crash site, a strange flicker pulsed in the sky. Not lightning. Not a star. Not alone. She didn't mean to stay. The orchard had been meant as a stop, a place to mend, hide, and move again. Iron had spent her whole life learning how to vanish. How to leave behind things that could be used against her. Yet here she was. 3 days had passed since the crash. Leaf no longer flinched at the wind. The man, Nico, no longer kept his distance. And she, whose skin had always been watched with suspicion, now carried the scent of peaches and smoke in her hair and the feel of earth under her fingernails. She wasn't sure how it happened. One moment she was dragging her brother through a broken escape pod, bleeding and hunted, and the next she was pruning fruit with a man who didn't ask questions. Nico had eyes like old rivers, quiet, steady, but deep. His silences didn't press, and his kindness didn't ask for anything in return. She wasn't used to that. Her people traded affection in promises and loyalty in fear. Even love came with binding contracts and ancestral strings. But Nico simply handed her a cup of tea every morning and said things like, "You sleep better near trees, don't you?" as if he already knew the answer. He did not touch her. Not by mistake. Not even in small ways. It made her ache more than if he had. Because it meant he saw her. Really saw her. And chose patience. She found him one evening mending a fence post. "You should have left us," she said simply. Nico paused. Looked at her. Then at the orchard stretching behind them. "Should've," he agreed. "But I didn't." "Why?" "Because this land doesn't belong to me." "Not really. I just take care of it." He lifted his head. "Seems like it wanted you here." "The land wanted me." "It wakes when you walk through it." "Didn't used to do that." She turned, suddenly uneasy. "You feel it too." "How could I not?" They were silent for a moment. She looked down at the dirt between her bare feet. "Leaf has always had the gift. But it's growing. It answers him now without warning. It shouldn't." Nico set the hammer down gently. "And if it keeps growing? He becomes something they fear more than anything. A child? A reminder," she whispered. "That they can't control everything they create." Nico knelt, rubbing the back of his neck with one calloused hand. "I'm not a fighter. Not a revolutionary. Hell, I barely qualify as a decent neighbor. But I can tell when something's worth keeping." She looked at him sharply. He didn't flinch. "You both are." The night grew cold. Leaf slept curled beneath a canvas tarp, breathing easy for the first time in weeks. His skin shimmered faintly in the dark, a sign the energy was still moving through him, unstable, but not hurting. Iron sat by the edge of the orchard alone. Nico joined her after an hour. Neither of them spoke at first. Then he said, "You were going to leave, weren't you?" "I still might." He nodded slowly. "I'd understand. But you don't want me to." His voice was quiet. "No." A part of her wanted to run. That part had kept her alive across 7 systems, across 5 false identities, across the betrayal of her own blood. But the other part. The one that still hummed with warmth from his tea, his silence, his gaze. Wanted to stay. He turned his head and looked at her. "Your brother." When he touched that sapling near the well, it bloomed. "He doesn't mean to do it," she said quickly. "It's reflex. Subconscious. I believe you. But that doesn't make it less dangerous." "Dangerous to who?" She hesitated. "Everyone who's built their life on the idea that power must be controlled. Passed down. Measured. Feared. What if we tried something different here?" She turned. "Like what?" "Just, letting him be a kid." Iron laughed softly. It startled even her. "He's never been just a kid." "Then maybe it's time he tried." She looked at him. "And what about me?" His answer was immediate. "You've never had anyone who let you just be either." She froze. His words landed too close. Too real. Her whole body wanted to shrink away from the truth of it, but instead, she leaned closer. "I don't know what I'm doing here," she admitted. "Me neither. I don't trust easily. I don't ask you to." They didn't touch. Not then. But something shifted. The next day, the orchard bloomed again. A second time. In the wrong season. It started small, 3 rows of peach trees bursting into flower as if they'd forgotten the time. Bees arrived. Early, confused. And Leaf laughed. Actually laughed. Irene dropped her tools and ran. She found him near the old irrigation ditch, sitting cross-legged and tracing shapes into the soil. Behind him, the trees stood taller. Greener. Leaf, she cried. What are you doing? He looked up. Blinked. His eyes glowed like ice. Not cold, but clear. She reached him and knelt, searching his body for signs of overload, skin too hot, energy vibrating too fast, but he was calm. Balanced. Nico arrived behind her, panting. He's okay, he said quietly. No, this isn't normal. This much energy, it should, she stopped. Leaf was humming. And the plants were humming back. Nico crouched beside them. What's happening? Irene's voice was hushed. He's sinking. Not to his own world. To this one. Nico's brow furrowed. What does that mean? It means, he's beginning to belong. That night, Irene sat beside the old water barrel. The moon reflected faint silver across the orchard. Crickets sang. Nothing in the sky moved. Nico approached and sat across from her. Can I ask you something? He said. You just did. He smiled. What does it feel like, when you run? She tilted her head. Heavy. Like the past keeps following. Even if I don't look back. So stop. It's not that simple. Why not? Because stopping means someone can find you. He reached forward, slowly. His hand hovered near hers, just close enough to feel his warmth. What if you're not alone anymore? Her breath caught. Her fingers moved. Not to pull away, but closer. Until they touched. The moment was soft. Unspoken. But she felt it. Something she hadn't felt in years. Home. When she returned to the shed, Leaf was already asleep. His skin glowed faintly, steady now. Not dangerous. Not unstable. She laid beside him and whispered, they'll come, you know. His eyes opened halfway. He didn't speak, but his hand found hers. They'll come, she repeated. But I don't think we'll be alone anymore when they do. His fingers tightened slightly. And outside, in the quiet orchard, the petals rustled again. This time not from fear. But from something growing. Something blooming. The world made too much noise. It always had. Before the crash, before the escape, before the night sky split open and they fell like broken stars, Leaf had already lived 1,000 years inside his head. Not because of memory. But because of sensation. He felt everything. Not in the way his sister, Irene, did, with caution and careful love, but through the soil, the air, the light that shimmered on things others didn't notice. And now. Earth hummed to him. It wasn't like Vayara, their birth world, where the ground burned and the skies cracked with energy storms. Vayara had tasted sharp and metallic. Like lightning. Like fire. But here, the dirt was soft. Cool. Forgiving. The orchard whispered when he walked between its roots. The bees blinked back at him. The trees bent just slightly toward him when he passed. Nico, the man who smelled like smoke and sap, didn't speak much. Leaf liked that. Nico's thoughts didn't rise up like alarms the way others did. His presence was calm. Grounded. Slow. Leaf could sit nearby and not be overwhelmed. Irene was different. She held her pain tightly in her shoulders, where no one could see. But he could. He always could. On the third morning, something strange happened. He was playing in the wild patch near the fence, where mushrooms grew in spirals, when the birds stopped singing. It was sudden. Like the orchard held its breath. Leaf stood up. His bare feet pressed into the earth, and he felt it. Not footsteps. Not machines. But watching. A single dot in the sky. High. Metal. Artificial. The kind of eyes he had known too well. He raised his hand toward it without thinking. Don't look at us, he thought. Not with fear. And then, with no effort at all, the drone cracked apart in the sky, silently, and fell in smoking pieces into the trees. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He just turned back to the mushrooms and sat down. He didn't know how to explain it to Nico or to Iron. Not fully. Not yet. He had no voice the way they did. Not because he couldn't speak, but because speech was like trying to fit oceans through a straw. Instead, he felt. So he showed them. That night, when Nico gave him a bowl of stew and sat beside him in the shed, Leaf pressed a hand to the cracked clay cup on the floor. The hairline fracture sealed instantly. Nico blinked. You fixed that? Leaf nodded. He touched Nico's chest gently. Sadness. The man stilled. Yeah, he whispered. I guess I've been carrying that a while. Leaf tapped his own chest, then tapped Nico's. A gesture. The same. Nico's eyes softened. You feel it too. Leaf just leaned his head on the man's shoulder. Small. Still. Quiet. And Nico didn't move. Didn't flinch. Just sat there with him. In his dreams, the orchard bloomed endlessly. He wandered among trees that moved like dancers and skies that echoed with laughter he'd never known but always longed for. And in the middle of the grove stood his sister, glowing faint silver like the moon, one hand extended. Behind her was someone else. Taller. Darker. Not Nico. A shadow. When he woke, the stars were gone. Not just covered. Gone. He stepped outside quietly, not wanting to wake Iron. His bare feet moved silently across the dew-wet grass. Nico stood at the edge of the hill. His body stiff. They're coming, aren't they? Nico said without turning. Leaf nodded once. Can you feel them? Another nod. Nico glanced down. How many? Leaf pointed both hands to the sky and slowly opened his fingers. Numbers too big to count. Nico exhaled. They stood side by side in silence. You scared? Nico asked softly. Leaf thought about it. He remembered fire. He remembered the screaming metal ships that hunted them through the stars. But here? He shook his head. Not scared. Not now. The next day, Iron taught him how to bind branches. Gently, she said, so they grow in the direction you want. Force only breaks them. He listened. His small hands mimicked hers, twisting soft wire around the limbs, shaping them. She smiled. You always learn fast. He looked up. And gently sent a pulse of warmth into the tree. The leaves brightened. The bark shimmered. Iron froze. You didn't speak a word, she whispered, but it listened. He nodded. Like you do. Her hand touched his cheek. My little miracle. When the message came, on a blinking screen in the back of the pod, it said only one thing. Subject classified as Bloom-tier anomaly. Strike directive authorized. Cleanse with fire. Leaf felt it before the screen lit. His chest had already gone tight. His ears buzzed with the hum of energy signatures in orbit. Iron panicked. Nico didn't. The man simply walked outside and began pulling out old tools. Fuses. Wires. A rusted weather drone. Leaf watched him for an hour. Then sat beside him. You don't need to help, Nico said. We'll keep you safe. Leaf tilted his head. You can't. Maybe not, Nico sighed. But we'll try. Leaf reached out and touched a wire. The metal reshaped itself instantly. Clean. Perfect. Nico stared. Okay, he muttered, maybe we've got better odds than I thought. The night before the attack, the sky rippled. Not with light. With pressure. Something immense moved beyond the clouds. Leaf walked out to the grove alone. The trees shifted to make way for him. He sat in the center and closed his eyes. Beneath the earth, the roots stirred. Within his mind, he reached. And the orchard reached back. He didn't need weapons. He was part of something now. Not a weapon. A system. A memory. A seed. When the ships finally came, the orchard was quiet. But not still. The grass buzzed faintly. The wind carried more than scent, it carried intent. Leaf stood in the barn while explosions echoed outside. He felt the ground shake. He heard his sister scream. And then, silence. Not absence. Pause. He walked to the center of the cellar. Knelt. And called. Green light exploded upward. Not rage. Not fear. But a force that knew only one purpose, life. Vines erupted from the ground, swallowing one of the attackers. Birds screamed into the sky. The soil beneath the warship fractured and swallowed the landing gear. He rose into the air, barefoot and glowing. His voice wasn't loud. But it was heard by everything. Enough. Later, after the flames died, he sat beneath the tree his sister had bound the day before. It was blooming now. Not because of him. But because of the way they had shaped each other. Nico sat nearby, cleaning a burn on his arm. Iron leaned her head against Leaf's shoulder. He was tired. But not scared. He had no words for what he had done. For the strange peace in his chest. But he understood something now. He was not here by accident. He had not been born wrong. He was not broken. He was becoming. Mirren wasn't supposed to be this far from the Institute. Her mission clearance was limited to Region 13's inner corridor, soil scans, anomaly readings, maybe a survey or two. She was just a data analyst with a long title, a half-dead hover bike, and a fractured theory about energy blooms and planetary convergence. But the readings weren't just strange. They were impossible. The coordinates led her to a ridge above the orchard. What she saw from there made her drop her scanner. Trees, fruiting, blooming, glowing, in full shift. In early autumn. With no genetic modifications. No tech interference. No synthetic photosynthesis. It was as if the earth was being sung back to life. And at the center of it was a farmhouse with a rusted roof and two figures moving like wind and root. She zoomed in her scope. The man, weathered, flannel, solid. The woman, silver-skinned, graceful, with eyes like molten dusk. Mirren's breath caught. This wasn't a localized greenhouse glitch. This was something alive. She approached the farmhouse with her badge visible and her tone calm. Afternoon, she said as the man stepped out to meet her. My name's Mirren Dace. I'm with the Atmospheric Study Initiative. We picked up strange energy readings a few days back. He nodded once. Didn't flinch. That's odd. Just me and my trees out here. Mirren smiled politely. Sir, with all respect, your trees are glowing. He raised a brow. You get a lot of glowing trees in your line of work. No, she admitted. That's why I'm here. They stared at each other a moment. Then she noticed her scanner blinking, a soft spike of radiant life form data. "What's your name?" she asked. "Nico." He didn't offer more. "And the woman I saw near the West Grove?" He didn't hesitate. "Her name's Iron." The name tasted off in Mirren's mouth, foreign, elegant. "And the boy?" He paused now. "Just slightly. He's Iron's brother." Mirren nodded. Then frowned. "My scanner thinks he's a power source." Nico shrugged. "My stove thinks it's still the 1990s. Machines get confused." Mirren almost laughed. Then she turned toward the orchard and saw it again, a tree blooming even as its shadow fell across frost. "Can I see them?" she asked. "No." She turned back. "No. No," he repeated. "But you can stay for tea." The woman appeared just as the kettle started to whistle. She entered through the side door, barefoot and silent. Her skin shimmered faintly, and her eyes took in everything: the gear on Mirren's belt, the data pad, the slightly bent antenna at the top of her pack. She didn't speak right away. "You're Iron," Mirren said softly. "And you're not here by mistake," Iron replied. Nico poured the tea. No one drank yet. Mirren cleared her throat. "You know I have to report this. The readings alone." "Report what?" Iron asked. Mirren hesitated. "That something ancient is waking here. And it's tied to you." Iron's expression didn't change. But Mirren felt something shift in the room, like the air turned heavier. "Leaf isn't a threat," Iron said. Mirren's fingers tightened around her mug. "Then what is he?" "A mirror," Nico said suddenly. "You look at him, and you see what you're afraid of." Mirren looked at him. "And what do you see?" Nico didn't blink. "A reason to stay." The words hit harder than they should have. Mirren turned her gaze back to Iron. "You love him." "He's my brother." "No, I meant," Mirren paused. "Nico." Iron's silence stretched. "Then, I tried not to. But he made it hard." Mirren didn't know what to do with that. She was trained to analyze, not empathize. But she looked at the way Nico watched Iron, unmoving, open, anchored, and suddenly, her data didn't feel like enough anymore. She met the boy at dusk. He was sitting in the orchard, drawing circles in the soil. His eyes glowed faintly, like soft underwater light. When she stepped near, the air around him shimmered. She knelt. "Hi," she said. He tilted his head. "I'm Mirren." He didn't reply. Not with words. But her scanner beeped, and her heartbeat stuttered, because the soil beneath them had healed from her footprints. The blades of grass were standing again. "How are you doing that?" she whispered. Leaf pressed his hand to her chest. And for a moment, Mirren felt everything. Her fears. Her loneliness. The old wound of never quite belonging in her own field, surrounded by minds too rigid to feel what science couldn't prove. The boy was speaking. Not aloud. Not psychically. Just, being heard. And she understood. That night, she sat with Nico under the stars. "He's not just rare," she said. "He's rewriting the rules of organic energy transfer." Nico chuckled. "That sounds important." "It is," she hesitated. "But not as important as protecting him." Nico turned to her. "So you'll keep his secret?" She looked at the sky. "I already deleted the readings." He blinked. "Just like that?" "I saw Iron touch a dying branch today," she said quietly. "It bloomed in her hand. But when she saw me watching, she dropped it like it burned her." She turned to him. "They're not here to conquer. They're here because they had nowhere else." Nico exhaled. "And now?" Mirren looked back toward the barn, where Leaf's light glowed faint behind the wood. "Now I think they've started to belong." When the warning came again, from a high-orbit ping intercepted by her old research drone, Mirren read it twice. Anomaly designated hostile Bloom class. Prepare orbital neutralization strike. She closed the message and stood. She ran to the barn. Iron, she shouted. Both Iron and Nico appeared from the kitchen. Leaf was already awake, standing at the door like he'd known. They're coming, Mirren said. Not scouts this time. A fleet. Nico clenched his jaw. How long? Less than 20 hours. Iron turned to Leaf. We need to move. But the boy shook his head. He walked into the orchard again. And the sky responded. Flowers bloomed along every branch. Even the dying trees. Blossoms fell like snow. Vines grew across fences. Roots hummed underfoot. The land itself rose around him. He whispered one word. And Mirren heard it in her bones. Stay.